Greetings, this is City Manager Alex Nguyen. This is the video for the November 18, 2025 City Council meeting. The item is, as is shown on the screen here, a proposed agreement for a transition plan that would turn the Ormond Beach Power Plant ultimately in terms of being the supplier of electricity from a power plant to a battery storage plant. And that would result in having a date certain closure of the plant, as well as the corporate owners making a sizable investment for South Oxnard. So as a reminder for folks who haven't been there in a long time or have actually never been there, this is the power plants at Ormond Beach that we are talking about. So the recommendation is that City Council approves our effort to seek state approval. And I want to repeat that. We're asking our City Council to approve our effort to actually seek state approval of this proposed agreement, which clearly means that City Council approval alone does not trigger the agreement. It would still need approval by the state of California. So it would be for a 4-year agreement to transition Ormond Beach, the power plant, to become a battery storage facility. And again, the corporate owners would make a $45 million investment in South Oxnard, and it would provide two major items. Number one, it would create a South Oxnard-based nonprofit legal aid that would serve our low-income residents, specifically in the areas of immigration, housing, and employment rights. So that's item one. Item two, it would also fund the creation of a new public facility to serve the South Oxnard community. Second half of the recommendation, if the council approves this, would mean that they authorize the city manager or my designee to sign the agreement and associated documents related to this. So currently, and by way of a short background, currently the power plant is open. It was scheduled to close in 2020, but because of the electricity reliability needs of California's electricity grid, the state extended the operations back in 2020 for 3 years, and the state found itself in a similar situation, and at the 2023 closure schedule, it was extended again. Now, it's up, as the title of this slide says, it's up for closure at the end of 2026. However, the state may or may not, but may extend it again. And if that were to occur, and then we could see ourselves in 2029 facing a similar dilemma. So this is why, in working together with Genon, again, the owner / operator of the power plant, we've come up with this proposal, which is, as they transition to battery storage, we will then achieve a date certain closure schedule. The idea is next year, again, if we get approval from the state, we would begin the formal process for creating the battery storage facility, which would be adjacent to the power plant, which is next to the electric grid. The state, if it approves, it would then move this plant, the Ormond plant, from the closure schedule, which again has options for extensions, to what we propose, which is the transition schedule with a date certain closure. But that would mean the state would agree that there could be no more extensions on the power plant possible. In other words, the transition schedule means that during that time, we'll work to create the battery storage. And when that battery storage facility comes online, the power plant comes offline so that we can actually begin not only the decommissioning process, but equally important, the demolition process. The power plant is owned by GenOn, and to be a good corporate citizen, they are agreeing to make what I call generational investments for South Oxnard. Two, again, premised upon state approval, they would provide $16 million for Oxnard to create a nonprofit legal aid that would be housed in South Oxnard. And after that, during the term of their transition plan, they would fund $29 million for Oxnard to create a public facility that serves South Oxnard. If we don't pursue this proposal, which is an option, we will stay on the 2026 closure schedule. If the state sticks to that schedule and does not extend the power plant, which is a possibility, then it closes at the end of 2026, and that would be pretty much the end of this chapter with regard to the state's closure schedule and the state's possibility of extensions. So that is a possibility. Another possibility is heading into next year, the state indeed extends the power plant operation again, hence another extension, a third extension. And if that happens, then without this partnership schedule, then South Oxnard gets nothing during the next extension. And if there is another extension that we don't have a part of, it also, not only would it mean South Oxnard gets nothing for it, but it also means that we could be back here. If that were to happen, we could be back here again in 2029, figuring out about yet another extension. So those possibilities exist. Now, what do we think is going to happen? Well, nobody actually knows. Now, there are engineers and electric grid experts and a slew of staff experts across various state agencies and commissions that have a much better set of facts and information as we head into this next round of to close or not to close. But if we look at, as one example, the most recent California Energy Commission report from May of this year, it's a very technical report. I acknowledge that we on city staff do not have the expertise to fully understand everything, but I'm certainly able to extrapolate some of the information. And here's one example that they lay out, which is currently, especially when it comes to electric grid reliability, the impact of major weather events still demonstrates that the state is would be in an electricity deficit. Now, there are various examples of how much electric supply there is, whether it comes from inside California or is imported into California, whether it's coming from legacy generators or clean energy sources, renewable energy. There's a lot of information there. But in the end, I believe that it will come down to their ability to accurately project whether there's enough physical supply of electricity, not for regular use necessarily, but more importantly, for emergency uses, for, in essence, backup energy, backup electricity available for reliability issues and moments when the grid calls upon it. So when you see those kinds of matters called out, you can understand that there is some concern that there may not be enough. And that leads me to believe and understand why in the past two cycles they wanted to extend the operations of some of these power plants. From if you just think about it from the physics of the supply of electricity, it makes sense. I can understand that. Adding to that, of course, is the potential for federal intervention. So under the current administration, they've sent clear signals that they don't want any power plants to close. And this is just one recent example. This article was just from September. And you can read exactly what it says about the potential goals of basically denying the ability for the power plants to close down, but you can also read between the lines that this could definitely go beyond this. We don't know if, when, and how far these sorts of interventions will go, but I think we're all aware enough to at least agree that if they choose to do so, they will. Now, with regard to what happens if the city council approves this and the state approves it, well, then it means the power plant will indeed continue operating for a few more years. And what does that mean? So it's important to acknowledge the actual pretty significant decrease of the activity at the Ormond power plant. And you can see this is information reported by GenOn, which they have to report to the state of California. We can see the activity has decreased significantly just in the last 5 years. And it's also important to raise this, that our own Ventura County Air Pollution Control District, in its most recent annual report, where they outline the locations where they have concern, and they have, I think it's high, intermediate, and low risk. In this report, the Ormond Beach Power Plant doesn't even show up. And I raise this to make sure that we're all working from the same sets of facts, and that we're not either overblowing their impacts or underplaying their impacts. We just need to address it for what it is. So the good news is that their online time, the time when they're actually producing electricity and running the plant fully, has decreased significantly over the years, and that their negative impact to the surrounding community also, as a correlation, has significantly decreased. And as of now, they don't even show up on the Air Pollution Control District's annual report. Just want to address the facts and the reality for what they are. Now, why battery storage rather than, hey, just let it go down, let it turn off, and then we'll just take the plant down and leave it at that? So why battery storage is a couple of major reasons. One is that battery storage of electricity is clearly a component of this nation's clean energy future. I think that if you look at the efforts across the country of creating more and more clean energy facilities, battery storage is a major player. So we know that's part of the near future. And the other thing that I believe is rather obvious, but important to point out, they're going to be built where they easily can plug into the existing electric grid. Yes, I'm not sure if that is a word, easily, but it sounds correct. And it just, to me, it's common sense. We are not going to want, we meaning communities. Communities are not going to want to have to contend with building battery storage facilities in the middle of nowhere or in the middle of a neighborhood that then requires additional infrastructure to hook into the electric grid. It makes sense that we're going to have battery storage where it can conveniently, or again, easiestly plug into the existing electric grid. I don't believe we're going to see new transmission lines being built across any community or any neighborhood, um, or substations or anything like that. So that makes sense. And in fact, I would say, and I say this in the report, I wouldn't be surprised if sooner or later that will become another state mandate with regard to land use rights that override local jurisdictional regulations. It just makes sense. Now, if we get to this, what does South Oxnard get? And again, um, for having these additional years of the power plant uh, being active, and but reminder, if this occurs, at least we know these would be the final years, and I think that's also an important point to repeat. So the two things combined $45 million into South Oxnard from the corporation, 16 million to create what I'm hoping we will call the Centro Legal de Oxnard, the legal aid for our low-income community, which we've never had in Oxnard and is severely needed. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides, or the next slide. And during the term of the transition plan period, 29 million additional dollars from the corporation to create a public facility that serves South Oxnard. So, what is this Centro Legal all about? It would be the first nonprofit independent legal aid organization that serves low-income residents in the areas of immigration, housing, and employment rights. Oxnard is a community that desperately needs this kind of nonprofit independent organization. So that's the first big one. Now, what does that mean? The example that I am honored to utilize is Centro Legal de la Raza out of Oakland, California. And they have a very, very nice website that provides a lot of information. Everyone's welcome to go there and check them out. But as you can see here, the main work, immigration, housing, and workers' rights. So the possibility to create this for Oxnard and to do so with a $15 million endowment that year after year can help fund the organization as it grows and matures and evolves and gets bigger and better. The 1 million, because this is a $16 million package, the 1 million is simply to start the actual work and provide operations in the first couple years while the endowment is established and takes a little time to generate the annual interest earnings to provide for the nonprofit. There's a little bit more detail about that in the staff report. Next and second, during the transition plan period, Genon would make a total of a $29 million corporate contribution to the city in order to create a public facility that would service and serve the South Oxnard community. There are definitely some very, very good ideas already as to what that could be. However, um, if this were to come to pass, we would be relying on the council members who represent districts 5 and 6 of South Oxnard to lead public workshops to gain public input to understand what the ideal facility to create would be. If this happens, we could commence that as early as 2027. Okay, just a reminder though, even if the City Council approves of this proposal, which I certainly hope they do, it still requires approval by the state of California. And as we all understand, that depends on the state's determination ultimately of what the electric grid reliability needs will be in the coming years. And that then would have to be balanced against what all the other states' needs are across the state budget. So to put it simply, while we fully support this concept and would appreciate the city council's approval so we can pursue this, this is a long shot. This is a long shot, but we believe one worth taking. So, final reminder, if we don't do anything different, if we just stay on the state's schedule, these outcomes may be true. The state may indeed not extend the power plant next year. And if that's the case, fine. Then we can begin the decommissioning process after the end of 2026. So just call that 2027. But even if that were to happen, don't forget, we do have concerns about the potential for federal government intervention. That is not something that is out of the realm of possibility. Or the state can, as it's done twice now, mandate another extension. And if that happens without this proposal and this plan, then South Oxnard gets nothing, and we'll be back here again in 2029. So those are the potential outcomes if we just stay on the current schedule. If we try to get this plan approved by the state, then we will achieve a date certain closure for the Ormond power plant. GenOn will be able to replace it with battery storage. So in essence, provide the state's electricity grid with a similar load of electricity without the power plant components. And we would receive two large, tangible, meaningful, multi-generational investments for South Oxnard. Again, long shot, but it's a shot we strongly suggest and recommend taking. And that is it. Thank you very much.